Just want to welcome everybody back to session number 5, diversity in the home. As you know, we're almost like 3/4 of the way completed. We had session 4 earlier in the day, so the homework, when we talk about homework, you won't be doing your homework for section 4 until tonight, along with section number 5. So just remember that. The other thing is that before we get started, just want to go over some ground rules right quick, and I think I have my rules up here. Start on time, be courteous of others, one person speak at a time. Please put all your cell phones on vibrate. If you do get a call, just feel free to step out, answer your call, and come back in. Want to remember that there are no dumb questions, and we do have an area where you'll be able to put your questions on, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. If you misspell a word, this is not an English class, it's okay. And you permission to pass or take care of yourself, and remember the Vegas rules. What goes on in here stays in here. We will be talking about some sensitive items of those nature, and again, when we talk about these items, there's some confidentiality in those items. Are there any questions so far? Again, I want to welcome everybody to session number 5, welcome diversity in the home. OmniVision is no different than any other child placement agency here in North Carolina. We place children in the home because of the need of the child, and what we feel is a good fit for that particular child. We don't look at culture, we don't look at race, we don't look at religion. We look at what we think is the best for that child, working with the parents that we know are parents. So you may get a child of a different nationality, a different race, a different culture in your home. And the one thing I always tell my parents is that, you know, when we talk about diversity and welcoming that child into your home, it's a give and take situation. It's not all on the child. It is on the parents also to welcome that child to home. And we'll talk about those things that you will need to do to be able to welcome that child into your home. Okay.
Can you go to the parking lot right quick?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yes. Session, welcome back again. Key topics from session 4. We talked about effective consequences in the home, implementing effective consequence. We talked about what's an effective consequence versus an ineffective consequence. You know, one thing we got to remember: a consequence is effective if you see a noticeable decrease in the undesirable behavior over a period of time. Often consequences do not work immediately, so it is important to give consequence a true trial run. Sometimes it takes time for when you consequence an individual for you to receive your results. But you know, one thing we talked about during session number 4 was don't give up. Stay focused and implement that consequence. The other thing we talked about is implementing consistency. You know, a lot of times when you have a husband and wife in the home, both of you have to be on the same sheet of music. One parent can't be saying one thing and another parent saying something else. I mean, when they can conquer you, when they can divide you, they can conquer you. I mean, nothing different than your own children. When I had my 3 children, they know what to come to me to ask for, and they know what to come to their mother to ask for. And they were very smart at that. Foster children are no different. When we talked about implementing consistency, both of you have to be on the same sheet of music. You've got to make sure that if you say it, if you're going to do it, say it. And if you say it, do it. So remember that. And the other thing to remember is that, and we talked about this in session number 4, is that when you give a child a consequence, sometimes it's going to affect you as a parent. Because let's say you tell the child, you're not going anywhere today. We were going to the movies, or we were going to the mall. So what happens is you now can't go to the movies, or you can't go to the mall. So it's going to affect you also. So just remember that when you're giving out that consequence, remember that it's going to have an effect on you also. And then we talked about behavior contracts. And you know, as everybody knows, developing behavior contract is, remember to keep it simple. You know, try to focus on one behavior at a time. Don't make it too difficult for them. And we talked about making sure that you post that behavior contract in an area where they can look at it and you can review it on a daily notice. And the one thing to remember is that behavior contract, make sure you give them some type of reward. And we talked about rewards, instant reward versus, waiting 2 or 3 days later and then telling the child they did something good. If they did something good that day, give them a reward. And a reward is not always monetary. A reward could be, you did a good job today and I'm proud of you. So just remember those things there. Are there any questions on session number 4? If not, we're going to move into session number 5. Session number 5 is diversity in the home. And before we go into session number 5, I want to talk about, and the door brought it up, the parking lot. I have a sheet of paper in the back there on the wall. The parking lot is used for if you have any questions. And I have some green paper in these baskets. Just write your question down there, tape it to the parking lot, and on our breaks, Dora will get those questions, and then before we start back up, again, we'll go over all your questions, and hopefully we'll have answers for you. If not, we'll get the answers for you. But it's just a way of you putting your questions up there in the parking lot, and hopefully that will speed up so that we don't have to be interrupted too much during the presentation. All right. Our agenda for today, and what I did was I had the agenda up here on this butcher paper because throughout the sessions this morning and early afternoon, I want to make sure that we focus on this agenda here and not get sidetracked. So I always keep this up here, and as we go through our agenda through the day, I always put a check mark up there so that we know that we hit on that area and there's no more questions about it. But our agenda is examine the culture, ethnic, and individual identity and consider the roles that these have in their lives and the self-concepts. Learn about the impact of foster care placement on youth's ability to develop their unique racial, ethnic, and individual identity. Determine and evaluate strategies to help therapeutic foster youth develop racial, ethnic, and individual identities, and you use a goal-setting tool to set short and long-term personal development goals. We will go over each one of these areas, and hopefully by the time you leave here this afternoon, you should have no problem understanding our objectives for the day. What I want to do is, for session number 4, there was a small activity that I would like for us to go back and to talk about session number 4 before we start talking about these objectives. And I'm going to turn it over to our Dora now.
Alrighty, in your packet there was a sheet and it had some concept reviews on there from session 4. Do y'all want to do them individually or you want to pair up to go over those questions like that? About 5 minutes. You want to pair up, it'd probably be easier. Okay. Alright, we'll give about 5 minutes. There's 3 questions, or there's actually 6 questions, but just take a few moments to look at that. And that's in your packet on these right here, the home practice reviews. It's an individual sheet, I'm sorry.
And what we want them to do.
Yeah, activity 5A, session 4, home practice reviews.
And the ones that we want you to be doing here is the top 3 questions. The other 3 questions is your homework when you go home tonight.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. If you want to pair up in groups of 2, I'll give you about 5 minutes to answer those 3 questions, and then we'll go over them right fast.
So what is the difference between natural and biological?
Do you like to say little 5 and like that?
Yeah.
like Scott School, that was a natural consequence. So they didn't have to worry about that spikes in the sun. They put them there automatically. And then they allow for consequences. Let me set something in place for that consequence to happen.
Glad I got my glasses.
So what's the difference?
Differences naturally, you set that up. Naturally, you just let it happen. Logically, you set something in place like that.
And like, yeah, see, that's what we just kind of talked about. Yeah, that's I was just trying to read to make sure we were on the right track. I think we were. Okay, I made it. TV time or reduced TV time. Not getting to play with your peers or whatever. So that's homework, right? The last one's. Okay.
Alright. This has been about almost 5 minutes. You ladies are ready? We'll start off with our lady back here in the back. What is the difference between a natural and a logical consequence? What did you guys decide?
A natural consequence is something that you don't have to put in place. It's something that if you don't do something, it automatically happens, whether you put a parameter in place or not.
Okay.
It's automatically going to happen.
Okay.
If you have a child who goes outside and does not put their bike up, then the bike can be stolen.
Exactly.
That's a natural consequence. But if you have, what was it? A logical consequence. You have a child who perhaps doesn't study, won't do their homework. They come home, they're getting notes, and they're just assuming, I'm gonna pass, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And then, logically, they think, I can do this.
Yeah.
But in actuality, what happens is then you go in there and you get a grade that you're not pleased with.
Mhm.
That's a logical consequence because you didn't put forth the effort to study.
Exactly. All right. Let's hear from this group. What did you ladies determine was the difference between a natural and a logical consequence? Right around the same thing?
Yeah, we did. We were saying basically the same thing.
Can you give me an example of a natural consequence that you would use at home?
I think we had said that, a natural consequence.
Yeah, a natural one.
Well, I think we were just saying that how if, for instance, if a child, didn't want to put on their coat, I think that was one that we used.
Yeah.
If they didn't want to wear their coat and it's really cold
Yeah.
outside,
Uh-huh.
then they're gonna be, the child's gonna be uncomfortable, gonna be cold, could catch a cold,
Mhm.
things like that, you know.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, those are natural consequences, so, because so many times the kids that we work with, you know, there are power struggles.
Mhm.
And so the foster parents are constantly dealing with that kind of thing. It's not simple, but yet still, you know, is something that they have a lot of issue with sometimes.
Toboggans and scarves
Yeah.
and all of that. They don't
Yeah,
want
just
to
little
wear all
simple
that.
natural things that need to be done to keep them safe and healthy.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
yes, ma'am. All right, very good. Can you give me an example of a logical consequence that you guys have talked about?
We talked about homework, if a child does not complete his or her homework at night.
Okay,
And, you know, homework is a part of learning and a study technique as well.
okay,
Then the child does not know what's going on in the classroom or will receive a failing grade, a homework game,
Yeah.
a grade.
okay, very good, very good. All right, let's move on to the second question. Very good examples. What,
Sorry, that's,
yeah, I'll read it out to you. What is one situation that you should avoid using a natural consequence? What was something you ladies discussed?
one of the things that we discussed is like when you're telling a child to spill the top.
Yeah.
That is a consequence. You don't want them to, because that's a safety issue. So even though you're telling them, sometimes you might have to do a little bit differently with that. But a natural consequence, we don't want them to get burned to understand that it's hot.
Yes, yes, that brings up a lot of questions. All right, what was the one that you ladies had?
And we had used the same one, but we also said another one.
Okay.
The second one was that if you tell a child not to run out in the street,
Okay.
and you know, they could get hit by an automobile.
Mhm.
And that would be a consequence that you would certainly want to avoid because you don't want them to get injured.
Yes, so
Yeah, or harmed in
anything
any
that's
way.
life-threatening on both
Exactly.
levels, you know, you should use a good parental judgment and try to avoid that situation altogether.
Uh-huh.
All right, very good examples. All right, and then the third question was, what are some privileges you would remove as a consequence? And these children have lots of privileges at home. What was something that you ladies had thought would be a good example of a privilege you could remove?
So television time, use
Very good, yeah.
of mobile phones, you know, lots of times, particularly with teenagers, that phone is their lifeline. And, you know, you sit in the bed at a certain time because you know they need to get adequate sleep so that they can function in the morning.
Yeah.
And if that phone is in that room sometimes, so that's one of the things we do, we kind of
Okay.
remove that phone out the room. And when you show me you can be a little bit more responsible,
Mhm.
then we might be able to revisit how we do that.
Yeah.
Or limiting time on it.
Very
as well.
good.
Mhm.
That's what I was gonna say too, or maybe just reducing the amount of time that they had it. Instead of 2 hours a day, they could just only have it for an hour or 30 minutes, something like that. Still just as effective. Very
Mhm.
good. And what about you ladies? What did you guys have talked about?
Same as far as just reducing the time that they are maybe allowed to watch TV,
Mhm.
reduce playtime with
Okay.
peers or
Yeah.
outside time.
Yeah,
Those kinds of things.
Okay. all
Yeah.
right, very good, very
You
good.
know, one thing I want to point out is that, you know, what our parents did may not work for these kids today. I remember for me, when I got punished was, I was sent to my room. And I know I haven't been in any of y'all homes yet, but if you tell one of your foster children to go to their room, they will probably hug and kiss you because they got the television in there, they got the computer in there, they got everything in there. So what worked when we were growing up may not work with these children. So look at like the day's time.
I think it's also important to look at the amount of time that you may choose to implement that consequence, because if you do it too long, you have to, then they don't care. So
Yeah.
you've got to strike a balance, because you don't want them in that gray area where, you know, it doesn't matter, I don't have it anyway, or you take it for so long.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it doesn't matter to me. So you have to make sure that you're really kind of looking at what's effective, and it doesn't have to be something where it's a week-long time or a month's time, because at that time, you kind of lose the ability to affect change.
Yeah, just tweak the strategy just a
Yeah.
little bit. There's always something else.
And what about just taking everything from a child?
We call that corporal punishment. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that.
Very good. Alrighty.
All right. Are there any more questions on session number 4? Again, good feedback. I think you guys got the real gist of session number 4. But the big thing is to remember is be consistent and don't let them wear you down. Because once you give that child that consequence, and let's say it's a week of not doing something that they want to do, within that week, you're going to have the best child in the world. Because what they're trying to do, they're going to try to wear you down. So when day 3 come along, they can come to you all hugging and kissing on you, and you will give in and says, okay, you've been a good person, you've been doing your work, homework, schoolwork, and haven't had any problems in the last 3 days. We're just going to go ahead and reduce that consequence from 7 down to 3. So remember, got to be consistent. Be consistent when you get those consequences. Thanks a lot.
Power struggles.
And power struggles. And the power struggles. All right, I just want to go back over a couple of the ground rules. Again, be respectful for other participants' experience, opinions, and beliefs. Step out if you feel yourself getting upset. Feel free for self-care. And for this session activity, you will be provided with the option to participate in discussions or to work independently. And hopefully, with the small number class we have in here, we'll work as 2 groups, 2 apiece. And we might switch the groups around. So again, just want to keep that in mind. All right. Throughout this session, we will discuss the broader context of cultural sensitivity, the knowing who you are. The video you're about to look at explores the impact that time in foster care has on youth identity development, particularly their racial and ethnic identity. This video also emphasizes the role of the social worker, but all members of the youth treatment team, including the foster parents, therapists, direct care staff, biological families, play a critical role in the development of helping the children knowing who they are. And what we're saying there in a nutshell is it takes a village when we place these children in their homes, and it takes all of us working together to help these children out. I want to encourage participants to consider their own identity and put themselves in the shoes of the youth in the film while watching. And again, there is a couple questions that we want you, while you're watching the video, to be able to answer. And Dora's going to talk to you about those 3 things there. I think it's in your folder there.
The 3 questions we kind of want to keep in mind while we're watching this film is you want to write down 3 things that kind of stuck with you from the film. They could be new ideas or just something that just simply hits home for you. Things that you may have experienced if you feel like sharing. We want to identify 2 strengths that you have or that you can identify within the structure of your family, and that will support the individual identity development in your youth. And the last one was to write 1 area in which you would like to improve in order to support your youth's identity development more effectively, such as something you would like to do or learn about them themselves. Okay? All right, so that's 3 things that struck with you from the film. Ideas or something that you could relate to. 2 strengths that you have or within your family structure that support individual identity development. And then the last one is the 1 area of improvement for yourself. Okay? So as we go along when we're watching the film, just try to jot some of these down. If you forget them, I'll repeat them for you.
Can everybody hear that?
high and high school are probably the most difficult, because junior high is when you're kind of forming your identity, and everybody in that age group is trying to, have an image or, project what they want other people to know and see about them. And when I first went into junior high, I was at a pretty diverse school. It was every race imaginable and highly populated with Hispanics. So in order to fit in, I immediately kind of clicked in with like a Hispanic group, started acting like them, dressing like them, using the same kind of slang, like doing their makeup like the girls did. And then I would get made fun of at home for doing that. As I got older, it became more difficult because I was surrounded by nothing but Caucasian people. And so I had to try and fit in with them and not distinguish myself too much from the crowd. A lot of my friends tell me that I'm like whiter than them, a lot of my Caucasian friends. I guess because I don't speak with an accent, or I don't have a green card or whatever. Being in foster care doesn't help because you don't know your ancestry, you don't know what side of your family is what, and you have no foundation to refer back to. You don't know who you are in general, let alone your ethnicity. Like, okay, I knew that I was Mexican and whatever, I spoke Spanish, therefore I was Mexican. Like, I didn't even know I had Native American in me or Spanish. I didn't know that until the past few years. I always thought I was just plain old Mexican from Mexico. For a long time, I just rejected it. I didn't want to speak Spanish. I didn't want to, I didn't want to go down to Mexico and think that, that could be me. I didn't want to be noticed at all. Yeah, my struggle has been more internal than anything in terms of identifying who I am. Luckily, I was blessed with a really good social worker who cared about me. I mean, she helped me a lot, and it's all kind of made me who I am and made me be able to accept who I am.
Race and ethnicity is about who you are, where you come from. It identifies how you fit in the world. So I think that when young people are in foster care, oftentimes they don't always have the opportunities to get to know who they are in the context of their family or community, because they've been removed or placed in another environment.
Race is an uncomfortable subject for most to talk about. It brings up so many internal issues and uncomfortable issues, and racism and white privilege and internalized racism and all of those subjects that are just so painful to talk about, but really need to be talked about. The good things about being Indian. When I grew up, I heard that Indian people were drunk and lazy and were this and that, and I learned to deal with that. I learned to cope with that. But when I had children, I shielded them from that. And they didn't know what it was to be called a drunken Indian. And I remember when my son came home in the 3rd grade, and he was shocked, and he said, I was called a good-for-nothing Indian. And I can't think of anything about Indian that's bad. And on one hand, that was very good. I thought, he's proud of being Indian, that's very good. But on the other hand, I didn't prepare him. I didn't prepare him to deal with racism, to deal with the negative aspects that people project on us.
Coming up with a racial, cultural, personal, ethnic identity is extremely personal. Only you can decide who you are, where you're going, what you are. And number two, with youth growing up, that's their full-time job. That's what they're doing. That's what they're supposed to be doing. That's what racism is someone else deciding who you are, or what you're like, or what they can expect from you.
Ethnically, I identify myself as a Samoan, and that's because of my last name, which is a Samoan last name, but people assume that I'm either married or something else other than that being my ethnicity. But culturally, I never really had developed any type of cultural identity except for being a foster kid. Because being moved around into different foster homes since the age of 5, I've kind of adapted myself to that culture. And for me, experiencing the culture, I've just experienced betrayal and some bad things, but I've always known myself to be a foster kid, and I openly tell everyone that since I was in high school.
My son was in 6 foster homes. He was only gone 9 months, and he was in 6 placements. He ended up in a group home, and it wasn't a good situation. It wasn't the nicest neighborhood or the nicest place. It was just like a staff of people. He wasn't with a family. Just after every visit, it just tears your heart out. It can make me cry right now. It just really tears your heart out, you know, that my choices put him in a situation that I definitely did not want him in.
Well, when I moved to Richmond and in this foster home, there was a lot of different type of people, and they always tried to get me to be like them. And right across the street there was a basketball court. A lot of people there that was doing drugs and shooting dice, and gangbangers there shooting each other all the time. Foster care actually showed me who I really wanted to be, what I wanted to be, and what I didn't want to be.
I don't know how to really teach him to be proud to be black. They might not think that culture or race really matters to people, but then they get outside of their own box and then they see that it does.
Some foster kids really don't want race to matter, and I have come to believe that there are a couple of reasons. As an adolescent youth, fitting in and being just like everybody else is number one for them, and being a foster child makes them different already.
I still got issues sometimes because I grew up in so many different places and so many different atmospheres and cultures. Been in black homes, Asian homes, white homes, Hispanic homes, and they weren't all understanding of my own culture and my own identity. And sometimes I had to adapt to their standards in order to survive.
A person of color growing up in a white, pretty racist culture, there's some certain things you have to learn. For survival, you have to learn it, you know? And the sad thing about foster kids and all foster culture is we've taken away people's pasts. That's the whole setup, is you learn that from your culture. Native Americans, African Americans, 500 years of experience on how to deal with that. But you can put a kid in a white home and they're not able to reach back and find out, what do you do when someone calls me the N-word? What do I do when I feel really good about something, I lay it out and everybody's looking at me weird? You know, there's that connection. That's a big part to me of culture identity, is that connection. Where do you go? Where do you reach out? Who do you touch? And we cut that off. We need a way to nurture that, keep that coming back, and have mentors, relatives, somewhere that you can reach back and say, you know what, someone's done this before, help me out here.
Somebody else explore themselves, that you're not exploring yourself and you're not looking and seeing how you fit into it or how you react to it or how you feel about it. And youth are at all different stages of ethnic identity, and they're in different places with feeling okay about who they are ethnically, racially, in terms of their neighborhood and their family. So if you have a good relationship with the youth, then it goes pretty smooth.
It begins with the social worker. You know what I'm saying? And it's up to that worker who to help create those connections. You know, to try to open the channel or get what she can from the biological parent to pass that on to the foster parent. It's about collaboration.
I was at It's My Life conference with the African American group, and I was saying, you know, especially with African American males, you have to have mentors, you have to have role models. I can't teach an African American male what they need to know to navigate their lives or the streets or whatever. But 3 African American adult males in the group were like, oh, you have to, oh, it's your job. And afterwards, they were so sweet, they came up to me and they're like, I want you to understand what we were saying. We were saying that you need to be responsible for the outcome for that youth. You need to make sure that that youth understands you have high expectations for them and that your own ego is bound up with the outcomes for that youth so that you can do everything within your power to make sure they're successful.
I would like the social workers to look at themselves and the foster families to look at themselves first and see where they stand and how they feel with ethnicity. It's something that they need to be comfortable with themselves before they can reach out to the foster child. It's something that they need to either be educated and challenge themselves to deal with first.
It's the fear of talking about race and ethnicity and being able to hear and acknowledge the pain that I think we've all touched on is not easy. And I think people back away from it and they try to talk above it. And I think that it's a short term, but in the long term, it's the worst solution because it's going to leave the young people feeling that it's not worth talking about it. So it's an invalidation of who they are. It's an invalidation of the struggles that they're going through.
I agree. We have the tendency when we got Michael, who's black, our first child that wasn't of our race, was to feel like it's better not to talk about it. Well, that was wrong right off the bat. Treat it like the elephant in the room. Well, we now have a young man who is an Eskimo and he's proud of it, you know, and we talk about it, who we are and where we came from, and to treat it like it's something not to talk about is to treat it like it's something wrong, and it certainly is not.
Social workers need to know that they have your lives in their hands.
It's the sooner that you figure out where you're from, what you stem from, what's in your genes, what's in your blood, then that way it just makes it easier to follow suit and learn more about yourself and to create your own identity.
Luckily, I was blessed with a really good social worker who cared about me. I mean, she helped me a lot, and it's all kind of made me who I am and made me be able to accept who I am.
You know, the social worker might be the only person that these children have that's stable in their lives, you know, and I just want the social workers to know how important it is for the kids' self-esteem for them to do some research and some work and some acceptance of themselves so that they can help these children out.
Understanding how important race and ethnicity is to youth, it's not an option, it's not ancillary, this is the work. And I know that. I know it's very true. And this is the work. And a youth who has a healthy racial and ethnic identity is going to be successful. And that's the work.
All right. Very good video. Okay. Well, it had covered a lot of information. What was something that you ladies were able to identify with? Let's start off with the first question. Let's see. What 3 things stuck with you from the film? Let's start with this group first.
That the children are placed in the homes and the parents are not helping them to find themselves.
Okay.
That was one. And then another one is that they have the identity of being just a foster kid. That was another one.
And just the struggles that teens have.
Okay.
That very first young lady that was talking about how she was trying to fit in into different groups, and so there's just such a struggle, and we know that teens already are struggling trying to find themselves, and then when you deal with them not really knowing where they came from, really culturally, to identify, I think, so they're just trying, and that just really, as far as what we do, of course, that contributes to the behaviors and the frustration and all of that we see, and that the parents are dealing with.
Because there were several different struggles that she was going through. There was one for, self-identification, cultural identification. She could have, had issues with gender identification of where she fit in with that. She, and there's a lot of kids that do struggle in very similar situations like that whenever they're placed out of their home, out of their biological home. All right. What about this group down here? What were some things that kind of struck with you in the film, from your personal experience, or things that you found you could relate to?
A couple of things that we stood out. One was what really hit home when she said that when they're going into homes that they have to adapt to the home standard. That kind of gives me chills, because you don't want them to feel like they have to adapt. You want them to be able to embrace and express who they are. And I think that's part of our roles as foster parents. We have to help them navigate that and not feel like they have to adapt, that it is okay for them to be who they are when they come into the home. So I think that's one thing that, as a new foster parent going into this, that I have to make sure that I'm sensitive to.
Yeah, and a good part of that is building a good relationship with them straight from as soon as they get there, so they'll feel comfortable with you, so they feel trusting with you, and open to actually to express themselves. So those are the good things to keep in mind. What was something else that kind of stuck with you from the film?
Another thing that stuck as foster parents, that to hear a child say that we need to kind of examine ourselves and know where we stand when it comes to culture and race, because you can't have those dialogues if you're uncomfortable with it. Exactly. If you're coming into this and you're not thinking that you're ever going to have to deal with that. And I think the other part of that kind of piggyback was, I had wrote, what was it? That I think that the foster parent said that not talking about it, the elephant in the room kind of thing. So I think from two different perspectives, to hear the child say, we need to know where we are, and then for him to have been in a situation his first time and said, well, the way that we dealt with it was not to talk about it. That's never a good thing. You have to let them be able to know. And the other thing that stood out to me, and it's something that we know, I think, as parents, if you have a child, that middle school age, those junior high years are the worst ones, the most crucial. So a lot of those children that come into care, that is that age range, and sometimes I think we forget just that one dynamic in it of itself is difficult. It is. And then when you bring in the fact that they're a foster child, and if they're not feeling comfortable and they're trying to, if it's not harmful to them, sometimes I think as foster parents, we would have to kind of take a step back, and if it's not harmful and if it's something that's helping them learn to have some self-esteem about themselves and to find themselves, embrace it. So when she said she was coming into the home, and although she found a group that she felt like she could identify with, but she came into the home and she was criticized. She said she felt criticized for it.
Yeah.
So sometimes if you see that they're finding an avenue that they're feeling particularly positive about, embrace that in your home. You know, I'm not saying that it doesn't change who you are, but it doesn't stop you from bringing some avenues or some aspects and having that dialogue to see, well, what can we do to help support that, or what is it that you like, or you might have a particular food that they like, or, you know, just to begin to have that dialogue and bring it out into the home.
Yeah. And having a connection with their biological parents, you know, if you're able to, will help you answer, you know, some of those questions at first. And then you also have your case manager, and you also have the social worker to help you out as well. You need to really utilize those resources, because they have more information than what you have, and not being afraid of asking those questions, those open-ended questions, to try to pull out more information about that child and what's going on and stuff like that. And you want to make sure that your home is kind of on a neutral base, so that child will feel comfortable with, you know, sharing and open up or exploring those things. You know, here in Fayetteville, we have a lot of children that come from different religious backgrounds. And sometimes I think, even though that's the way they were initially raised, if they feel like you're not open to that idea, that could cause problems. That could cause power struggles later on. So you need to kind of be, you know, I can understand not totally agreeing with that, but you need to be open-minded to the point, okay, well, this is part of who that child is. That makes up their identity. Let me at least try to explore this with them to give them some safety and comfortableness to try to decide what's going to be best for themselves. And you brought out a very good point. That middle school age is a lot where they're molding their personalities, their identities, their likes. You know, birds of a feather will flock together, who they're hanging around with. You know, sometimes they might not necessarily start hanging around the best positive peer influences. So it really needs to be you guys as foster parents that help try to shape that and mold that for a child, so they'll be on a better basis for high school, thus adulthood. Okay?
And I just want a couple of things that I got out of the film was, the one lady, when she was talking about the gentleman that told her, you're responsible for the outcome. What they were telling her was, you don't have to do it all yourself. You know, in a community, even here in Goldsboro, I always tell, when we're here, when we live in Fayetteville, I call that the melting pot. You got churches, you got colleges, you got organizations, that if you get a child of a different nationality, a different race, that you can go find positive mentors that help you with the process. I remember just recently, during our Christmas party that we had for our foster children, and I noticed one of our new foster parents had just gotten 2 little sisters, and she was white, and they were black. And I noticed that their hair was cornrowed, and it was very neat and nice. And I asked her, I said, who did their hair? And she just smiled and she said, well, I reached out to one of my neighbors, who was black, to assist me with combing their hair. And what we came up with was, by putting their hair in cornrows, it was easier for me to maintain it on a daily basis and get them out to school on time, those things like that. I said, well, you were listening when we were going through MAP training, because that's what we talked about. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to know it all. You can ask people. You can get that assistance. And so don't feel that you have to be one that has to do it all yourself. You got the community around you. Use those resources in the community. That was the one good thing I got out of that. And then the other one that you brought up was, you can't treat it like it's the elephant in the room. I mean, you got to talk about it. You got to have those family meetings so that child feels comfortable in your home. Because if you don't talk about it, they're going to get the wrong impressions out there in the streets. Because I can tell you, there's more wrong out there than right. So I'd rather be in control of that, whatever that dialogue is going to be. I'd rather be in control of that and talk about it. Okay?
All right. Question number 2, what 2 ways you already support individual identity development in your youth? And you could have all types of different things that you're already doing at home. Let's start with you ladies over here. What was 2 things that you ladies are doing to help support your youth self-identification?
Finding the education on their background so that we can educate each other.
Okay,
And another one is, assisting them in finding out who they are, such
Okay.
as, for example, if it's an Hispanic child, maybe going to an Hispanic church on Sunday, finding that Hispanic group to get that information, even attending Spanish class.
exactly.
Me and the child learning how to speak Spanish.
Yeah, and the first 30 days, that honeymoon phase is a great opportunity to try to lay down some of those foundations. Sometimes these social workers will know that information, sometimes they do not. Sometimes a biological parent may tell you. We come across a lot of children who are multi-ethnic nowadays, and they want to share that, they want to claim all of that, so it's best for you to try to support all of that for that child. So yeah, those are very good things. And like you said, looking around in your community to see what's available to try to help you out as much as possible. There's nothing wrong with learning, whether that's a language, changing up your cooking style, just whatever like that. Very good. All right, what about you ladies in the back? What was 2 things that you feel like you are already doing to try to help support you?
I will say something.
Thank you.
I put just letting them be themselves, letting them
Okay.
express themselves, whether it's through, like